Get your dirty hands up and step off this porch before I put you on the ground!
Sir, please. This is my home. I live here.
Shut your mouth! Do you live here in Fairview Heights? Don't make me laugh. I can smell you from here. Whatever hole you crawled out of, it sure as hell wasn't this neighborhood.
I have my ID right inside. I can prove.
I said shut it! You don't get to talk, you don't get to move, you don't get to breathe unless I say so. Are we clear?
6 patrol cars, a helicopter overhead, 12 officers, weapons drawn, all of it aimed at one barefoot woman standing on her own front porch on a quiet Friday evening. Her name was Fiona Henderson, and what Sergeant Dale Crawford didn't know, what none of them knew, was whose name was about to appear on her phone screen. Let me take you back a few hours before all of that happened. Because this morning, Fiona Henderson's biggest problem was figuring out where to put her mother's spice rack. It was a Friday afternoon in mid-September, the kind of day where the sun hangs low and golden, painting everything in warm amber light. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and magnolia blossoms. Sprinklers hissed softly across emerald lawns. Somewhere down the block, a man in khaki shorts washed his silver Mercedes in the driveway. This was Fairview Heights, Virginia, a gated community of colonial-style homes, each one worth north of $1 million. Oak trees older than the Constitution lined the streets. Country club flags fluttered in the distance. The kind of neighborhood where people jogged with golden retrievers and waved at each other by first name. 96% of the residents here were white. That's not a guess, that's the census. Fiona Henderson had owned her home for exactly 3 weeks, paid $1.4 million in cash. No mortgage, no loan, no cosigner. Just 22 years of military service, a senior Pentagon consulting contract, and 2 decades of smart investments. Right now, she was barefoot in the living room, hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing yoga pants and a faded army t-shirt. Classical music played softly from a small speaker on the windowsill. Boxes were stacked everywhere, half opened, half labeled, some still sealed with packing tape. Books, kitchenware, framed photographs wrapped in bubble wrap. One of those frames sat on the mantel, still packed. Inside it was a photograph of Fiona in full army dress uniform, colonel insignia gleaming on her shoulder, American flag behind her. She hadn't hung it yet, hadn't found the right spot. Remember that frame. It matters later. In the kitchen, her mother Gloria hummed an old hymn while arranging jars of cayenne, paprika, and thyme on the shelf above the stove. Gloria Henderson was 72 years old. She walked with a wooden cane that had a rubber grip worn smooth from years of use. She had driven up from North Carolina 3 days ago to help her daughter settle in. Her hands were slow but steady. Her voice was Sunday morning soft. The house smelled like cinnamon and cardboard. Peace lived here. Fiona's phone buzzed on the counter, a calendar reminder. Video call with General Coleman, 6:30 p.m., DOD project briefing. She glanced at it, silenced the notification, and went back to slicing open a box of kitchen towels. That phone call was 2 hours away. She had no idea it would change everything. Now, across the street, behind a pair of lace curtains on the second floor, someone was watching. Diane Whitmore. White, mid-60s, lived in Fairview Heights for 19 years. She stood at the window holding a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, eyes fixed on Fiona's front door. She had been watching since moving day. Never walked over to introduce herself. Never brought a welcome basket or a bottle of wine like she did for the Andersons 3 years ago. Instead, she had asked neighbors at the mailbox who approved that sale, and did anyone vet her finances? Today, Diane saw a moving truck pull up, a delayed furniture delivery. 2 black men in work uniforms stepped out, unloaded a dresser and a bookshelf, and carried them inside. Fiona opened the front door, smiled, and waved them in. Diane set down her wine glass, picked up her phone, dialed 911. Yes, hello? I'd like to report suspicious activity at 412 Laurel Creek Drive. Several unknown black individuals are entering and exiting the property. It looks like they might be burglarizing the house. I don't think the owner is home. I've never seen these people in the neighborhood before. She described Fiona, the actual homeowner, as one of the suspects. Dispatch coded it as a possible home invasion in progress. Upscale address. Potential multiple intruders. Priority response. Units were dispatched within 60 seconds. In Fairview Heights, response time to a wealthy neighborhood was under 4 minutes. Sergeant Dale Crawford heard the call come over his radio. He recognized the neighborhood, volunteered to lead the response, called for canine backup and a helicopter, citing multiple suspects on scene. 6 patrol cars rolled toward Laurel Creek Drive. But here's the thing. By the time those cars arrived, the furniture delivery was already done. The 2 men had finished, shaken Fiona's hand, climbed back in the truck, and driven away. There was no crime, no break-in, no forced entry, no suspicious activity. Nothing. Just a woman and her elderly mother inside their own home, unpacking boxes and listening to classical music. And 12 armed officers heading straight for their front door. The first thing Fiona heard was the helicopter, a low, heavy thudding that vibrated through the ceiling and rattled the windows. The glass in the kitchen cabinet trembled. The classical music on the speaker disappeared beneath the noise. Fiona looked up from a box of dish towels. Gloria stopped humming. The 2 women locked eyes across the room. Then came the knock. Not a doorbell, not a polite tap. A fist, hard, fast, angry, slamming against the front door 3 times. The wood shook in its frame. The deadbolt rattled. It was the kind of knock that doesn't ask permission. The kind that says, we're already inside in our heads. Fiona set down the box, wiped her hands on her yoga pants, walked to the front door. She could see shadows moving through the frosted glass panel, multiple figures shifting left and right. She took a breath, turned the lock, opened the door. The porch was full of uniforms. Sergeant Dale Crawford stood front and center, feet planted wide, one hand resting on his holster. His badge caught the last of the evening sun and threw a sharp glint into Fiona's eyes. His jaw was tight. His nostrils flared with every breath. His eyes were already hostile, locked onto her like she was something he had been hunting all day. 2 officers flanked him on either side, hands on their weapons. Behind them, the street was a wall of flashing blue and red lights. 6 patrol cars, parked at angles across the road, engines still running. A canine unit sat at the curb, the German Shepherd inside barking so hard the vehicle rocked on its suspension. And above it all, the helicopter, circling slow and loud, its searchlight sweeping across the rooftop and cutting white lines through the darkening sky. The smell of exhaust fumes drifted up from the street. Radios crackled with static and coded chatter. The neighborhood had gone completely silent, except for the machinery of force. Neighbors had already gathered on their porches, arms crossed, wine glasses in hand. Some had pulled out lawn chairs, watching like it was evening television. Not one of them looked concerned for the woman at the center of it all. They looked entertained. Crawford didn't say good evening, didn't introduce himself, didn't ask if she was okay, didn't even look at her face first. He looked past her, straight into the house. His eyes swept the hallway, the stacked boxes, the bubble wrap on the floor, the coat rack by the door. Then his gaze moved back to her, scanned her up and down, slow and deliberate. yoga pants, faded army t-shirt, bare feet on cold concrete. No jewelry, no makeup, hair pulled back in a messy bun. He smirked, a small crooked lift at the corner of his mouth. The kind of smirk that says everything his badge won't let him say out loud. "Ma'am, step outside. We've received a report of a break-in at this address." Fiona kept her voice level. 22 years in the United States Army had trained her to stay calm when everything around her was chaos. She had delivered briefings to generals under mortar fire in Kandahar. She had managed logistics during a hurricane evacuation in Fort Bragg. She could handle a man with a smirk on her porch. "Good evening, officer. My name is Fiona Henderson. I'm the homeowner. There's no break-in. I was receiving a furniture delivery earlier this afternoon, but the crew has already left." Crawford tilted his head, squinted at her the way a man squints at a child who just told an obvious lie. "You own this house." It wasn't a question. It was a verdict wrapped in disbelief. "Yes, sir. I can show you my ID and the deed if you'd like." Crawford's lip curled just slightly. Almost a smile. Almost a sneer. The line between the two was razor thin and entirely intentional. "That won't be necessary yet. Step outside, please." Fiona stepped onto the porch. The evening air was cool against her bare feet. The concrete was still warm from the afternoon sun, but fading fast. She could feel the eyes of every neighbor on the block pressing into her skin like lit cigarettes. No one waved. No one called out to ask if she was all right. The silence from them was louder than the helicopter. Crawford asked for government-issued identification. Fiona turned, reached just inside the door, and retrieved her Virginia driver's license from her purse on the hallway table. She handed it to him. He took the card between two fingers, held it at arm's length, studied it for a long time, far too long. He tilted it under the porch light, turning it left, then right, like he was inspecting a counterfeit bill. Then he unclipped his radio from his shoulder and called dispatch. "Yeah, dispatch. I need you to run a name for me. Henderson, Fiona, Fiona, Henderson. He spelled it slowly, loudly. Each letter is deliberate and exaggerated, like the name was foreign. Like he wanted her, and every officer on that lawn, to hear it and wonder. A pause. Static hissed from the radio. The helicopter banked left and circled back. Then dispatch responded. No warrants, no criminal record. The address on the license matched the property. Registered homeowner confirmed. Everything checked out clean. Crawford lowered his radio. But he didn't step back. He didn't relax his posture. He didn't holster the attitude. He sure as hell didn't say, "Sorry for the trouble, ma'am. Have a good evening." Instead, he folded his arms across his chest, leaned back against the porch railing like it belonged to him, and crossed one boot over the other. "So, how exactly did you come to purchase a home in Fairview Heights?" Fiona blinked. "Excuse me?" "Simple question. How did you afford a place like this? This is a $1.4 million property." "I don't see how that's relevant to a break-in report, Sergeant." "I'm the one asking questions here, not you. Do you have employment?" "Yes." "Doing what?" "I'm a consultant." Crawford snorted. A small, ugly laugh pushed through his nose. The kind of laugh designed to make someone feel small. A consultant, right. Okay. He looked back at the officers behind him with raised eyebrows, like he was sharing a joke only they understood. One of them, Officer Brenda Nolan, looked at the ground. She shifted her weight, but said nothing. The other, young Officer Tyler Simmons, barely 25, pressed his lips together and stared at a spot somewhere above Crawford's head, visibly uncomfortable. Crawford turned back to Fiona. Is anyone else inside the residence? My mother. She's 72 years old. She's visiting from North Carolina. Uh-huh. His radio crackled once more. Dispatch confirming again, a final time, unprompted, that the ID was verified. The homeowner confirmed. No outstanding issues of any kind. Crawford heard it. Nolan heard it. Simmons heard it. Every officer standing on that lawn with a hand near a weapon heard it. And then Sergeant Dale Crawford did what men like him always do when the facts don't match the story they've already written in their heads. He ignored them. He turned to Officer Nolan, lowered his voice, but not nearly enough. Fiona heard every syllable, crisp and clear in the evening air. The ID checks out, but something doesn't sit right with me here. I want to clear the house. Nolan hesitated, just for half a second. A flicker of doubt crossed her face like a shadow passing over water. Then it was gone. She nodded once. Crawford turned back to Fiona. He squared his shoulders, straightened his spine, lifted his chin. He put on his official voice now, the voice they rehearse at the academy for moments when you need compliance without questions. Ma'am, for your safety and ours, we need to conduct a visual sweep of the interior, just to confirm there are no intruders or victims inside the residence. Fiona didn't flinch. She didn't stammer. She didn't blink. She had spent her entire adult life understanding law, military law, constitutional law, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, rules of engagement, Geneva Convention protocols. She knew her rights the way most people know their own heartbeat. Sergeant, I appreciate your diligence, but my identity has been verified. Dispatch has confirmed that I am the registered homeowner of this property. There is no evidence of forced entry, no broken windows, no damaged locks, no signs of disturbance. You do not have probable cause, and I do not consent to a search of my home. She said it calmly, clearly, without raising her voice even a fraction of a decibel. Every word placed like a brick in a wall. Crawford's face changed. The smirk evaporated. The amusement drained out of his eyes like water through a crack. What replaced it was something colder. His jaw locked, his shoulders squared tighter. His hand drifted back toward his holster, not gripping, but resting. A reminder, a message. This was a man who did not tolerate being told no, not by civilians, not by women, and certainly not by a black woman standing barefoot on a porch in a neighborhood he considered his territory. He stepped closer. Close enough that Fiona could smell the stale coffee on his breath and the leather of his holster. Ma'am, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. That's your decision. But I am going inside that house tonight. The helicopter circled above, its rotors slicing the air into rhythmic pulses. The canine barked again, sharp, frantic, relentless. Blue and red lights painted Fiona's face in alternating flashes, one after another, like a strobe. Her shadow stretched long behind her, then vanished, then stretched again. Officer Simmons, the youngest one on scene, shifted his weight for the third time. He opened his mouth. His lips parted like a word was trying to escape. Then he pressed them shut and looked away. And 2 doors down, standing quietly on his own porch in a gray hoodie and basketball shorts, a man named Terrence Davis raised his phone. He opened the camera app, tapped the red circle, hit record. The tiny red dot blinked in the corner of his screen. He didn't say a word. He didn't call out. He didn't announce himself. He just pointed the lens at Fiona's porch, steady, silent, unflinching, and let it roll. Crawford didn't wait for permission. He put his hand flat against the front door, pushed it wide open, and walked inside like he held the deed. His boots hit the hardwood floor with heavy, deliberate thuds. Each step echoed through the hallway like a judge's gavel. He didn't wipe his feet. He didn't pause. He didn't look back. Fiona followed him in, her bare feet silent against the floor. Her voice was firm but controlled, the voice of a woman who had commanded hundreds of soldiers and never once needed to shout. "Sergeant, you do not have my consent. I am asking you to leave my home. Right now." Crawford kept walking. He didn't turn around. He didn't acknowledge her words. He moved through the hallway like she hadn't spoken at all. Like her voice was furniture he could step around. Officers Nolan and Simmons followed him through the front door. Their boots left faint dirt prints on the polished hardwood. 2 more officers appeared from the back of the house. They had come through the rear door, which Fiona had left unlocked because she was in her own home in a gated community and had never once imagined she would need to lock herself in from the police. 5 officers were now inside her house without a warrant, without consent, without probable cause. The kitchen was the first room they reached. Gloria Henderson stood at the counter. She had been arranging spice jars on the shelf above the stove. A glass of sweet tea sat half-finished beside her. The hymn she had been humming still hung in the air like a ghost. When Crawford came through the doorway, fast, loud, armed, Gloria startled. Her hand jerked. The glass of sweet tea slid off the counter, hit the tile floor, and shattered. Brown liquid and glass shards scattered across the white tile in every direction. Gloria grabbed the counter edge with both hands to keep from falling. Her wooden cane, which had been leaning against the cabinet beside her, clattered to the ground and rolled under the kitchen table. Crawford locked his eyes on her. He planted his feet wide, one hand on his holster. He raised his voice, not to communicate, but to dominate. "Ma'am, hands where I can see them. Now! Who are you?" Gloria's hands went up. They were shaking. Not a small tremor. A full, visible shake from her wrists to her fingertips. Her lips moved, but no sound came out for a moment. Then a whisper, thin as paper. "I'm her mother. I'm just her mother." Her eyes were wide and wet. Her chest rose and fell too fast. She looked at the broken glass on the floor, then at the officers filling her daughter's kitchen, then at the gun on Crawford's hip. She looked like a woman who had just been dropped into a nightmare while she was making tea. Fiona's voice cracked for the first time that evening, not from fear, not from weakness, from a fury so deep it had to fight through every layer of discipline she had built over 22 years just to reach the surface. "That is my mother. She is 72 years old. She has a heart condition. You will lower your voice in her presence. Right now." Crawford didn't lower anything. He turned his back on Gloria and barked orders at his team. "Fan out. Every room. Closets, bedrooms, basement. Clear it all." The officers moved through the house like an occupation force. They opened closets and raked hangers aside, pulled coats off hooks, checked behind doors. One officer dropped to his knees and looked under the bed in the guest room, then pulled out a storage box and opened it. Winter blankets and old photo albums. He rifled through the photos, glanced at them, tossed them back. In the master bedroom, another officer opened the dresser drawers one by one. Fiona's personal clothing, folded neatly, organized by color, was pushed aside, disturbed, left uneven. He opened the nightstand, found a leather journal, flipped through the pages, read a few lines, set it down open, face up, on the bed. A third officer stood at Fiona's desk in the home office. He photographed documents with his phone, consulting contracts, bank statements, tax returns, a letter on the Department of Defense letterhead. Personal, private, protected. Crawford walked into the master bedroom. His eyes swept the room until they landed on a wooden jewelry box on the dresser. Dark mahogany, brass clasp. He opened it. Inside, a pearl necklace, a pair of diamond earrings, 2 gold bracelets, and a military service ring. He held up the pearl necklace, letting it dangle from his thick fingers, turned it under the light. Then he looked at Fiona, who had followed him into the room. "Can you prove these belong to you?" Fiona stared at him. Her eyes burned, but her voice stayed level. "You are standing in my home, going through my personal belongings, and you are asking me to prove they are mine." Crawford dropped the necklace back into the box, snapped it shut, turned to Nolan, who stood in the doorway. "Bag it. We'll take it back to the station and verify ownership later." He was trying to seize her property, right in front of her. Fiona stepped forward. 1 step. Just enough to close the distance and make her presence impossible to ignore. "You will not remove a single item from this house, Sergeant. Not one." Crawford turned slowly, looked down at her. He had 6 inches and 80 pounds on her. His hand rested on his belt, thumb hooked near his holster. He held the stare for 3 full seconds. From behind him, Officer Simmons cleared his throat. His voice was quiet, almost apologetic. "Sarge, maybe we should just..." Crawford spun on him. "Did I ask you, Simmons? Did I ask for your opinion? No? Then shut your mouth and do your job." Simmons went silent. He pressed his back against the wall and looked at the floor. Back in the living room, an officer had escorted Gloria from the kitchen. She shuffled slowly without her cane, one hand on the wall for balance, the other pressed against her chest. They sat her down on the couch. She sank into the cushion like her bones had given up. She was crying, quietly. The kind of crying that doesn't make noise because the person learned a long time ago that noise makes things worse. Tears rolled down the deep lines of her face and dripped onto the collar of her blouse. She looked up at the officer standing over her. Her voice was small and careful. "May I use the bathroom, please? I need to use the bathroom." The officer, young, white, stone-faced, looked down at her. "You need to wait here, ma'am. Just sit tight." Gloria nodded. She folded her hands in her lap. She pressed her knees together, and she waited. A 72-year-old woman, in her daughter's home, asking a stranger for permission to use the bathroom, and being told no. That image, that single moment, if nothing else from this story stays with you, let it be that. Crawford returned to the living room. He stood in the center of the space like a king surveying his domain. His eyes moved across the stacked moving boxes, still sealed, still labeled in black marker. Kitchen, books, office, Gloria's room. He pointed at the boxes. "Looks like someone moved real quick. Could be staging, could be squatting." Fiona's patience was a wire stretched to its thinnest point, but it held. Barely. "I moved in 3 weeks ago, Sergeant. I have the closing documents. I have the title. I have the mortgage satisfaction letter showing this home was purchased outright." Crawford rocked back on his heels, crossed his arms, tilted his head with that same crooked, dismissive half-smile. "People forge documents all the time. You'd be surprised." He unclipped his radio, pressed the button. His voice was casual, almost bored. "Dispatch, this is Crawford. I need additional units to secure the perimeter at 412 Laurel Creek. We're going to be here a while." More cars were on the way. The helicopter, which had drifted south, banked hard and swung back overhead. Its searchlight hit the front windows and filled the living room with a harsh, clinical white light that bleached the color from everything it touched. Gloria flinched on the couch. She raised one trembling hand to shield her eyes. Outside, the neighborhood had become a spectacle. More neighbors had gathered. Some stood at the end of their driveways. Others leaned on mailboxes. A few had their phones out, but they weren't recording out of concern. They were recording out of curiosity, the way people film car accidents on the highway. But Terrence Davis was different. 2 doors down, still standing on his porch, phone steady in both hands, Terrence had switched from recording to live streaming. The red live indicator pulsed in the corner of his screen. A small number in the bottom left showed viewers joining, 14, then 38, then 95, climbing with every second. He kept the camera pointed at Fiona's house, the flashing lights, the helicopter, the officers moving behind the windows like shadows. He still hadn't said a word. The footage spoke for itself. Inside the house, Fiona stood in her own living room, surrounded by officers who had no warrant, no cause, and no intention of leaving. Her mother sat weeping on the couch, denied the dignity of a bathroom. Her belongings had been searched, photographed, and nearly seized. Her financial records had been read by strangers. Her privacy had been gutted. And Sergeant Dale Crawford stood in the middle of it all, arms folded, waiting for her to break. But Fiona Henderson had survived things Dale Crawford couldn't even imagine. She wasn't going to break for him. Not tonight, not ever. And in exactly 11 minutes, his whole world was about to collapse. He just didn't know it yet. 6:29 p.m. The air inside the house was thick with tension. It smelled like boot leather, sweat, and Gloria's shattered sweet tea still drying on the kitchen tile. Crawford stood near the fireplace, thumbs hooked in his belt, surveying the room like a landlord deciding whether to evict. Then a sound cut through everything. A phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. Not a text, not an alarm, a FaceTime call. The screen lit up bright, casting a blue-white glow across the granite. Fiona looked toward the kitchen. She knew who it was. 6:30 p.m., right on schedule. She turned to Crawford. "Sergeant, I'd like to answer my phone." Crawford waved his hand like he was shooing a fly. "Go ahead, call whoever you want, sweetheart. Call the mayor. Call the president. See if I care." Fiona walked to the kitchen. Glass crunched under her bare feet. She picked up the phone. The caller ID glowed. B.G. Arthur Coleman, U.S. Department of Defense. She swiped to answer. Silver hair. Jaw carved from oak. Dress uniform pressed and decorated. On his shoulder, a single silver star. Brigadier General. Behind him, a Pentagon office, American flag, Department of Defense seal on the wall. Coleman started casually. "Fiona, you ready for the brief?" He stopped, read her face instantly. "Colonel Henderson, report. What is happening?" Colonel. The word drifted from the kitchen into the living room and landed on Dale Crawford like a falling piano. Fiona held the phone outward so Crawford could see everything. The star, the uniform, the seal. Then she delivered her report, not like a frightened civilian, but like a colonel briefing a superior officer. "General, I am in my home at 412 Laurel Creek Drive. Approximately 12 Fairview Heights officers are conducting a warrantless search. I did not consent to entry. My 72-year-old mother has been detained and denied bathroom access. My ID was verified by dispatch. Entry was made over my explicit objection." 3 seconds of silence, heavy as concrete. Crawford's face went white. His hand dropped from his belt. His puffed-up shoulders sank 3 inches. He stared at the phone screen. the star, the seal, the face of a man who outranked everyone he had ever met. Coleman's voice filled the room, low, steady, sharp enough to cut steel. "Sergeant, this is Brigadier General Arthur Coleman, United States Army. You are inside the home of Colonel Fiona Henderson, retired. She holds an active top-secret clearance and serves as a senior consultant to the Department of Defense. Do you have a warrant?" Crawford's mouth opened. A broken sound came out. "Sir, we received a report." "I didn't ask what you received. I asked if you have a warrant." Silence. The loudest sound in the house. Nobody moved. Nolan stood frozen, jewelry box in hand. Simmons pressed against the wall. The two officers from the back door exchanged a look that said, "We are finished." Coleman spoke to Fiona. "Colonel Henderson, I'm making calls now. Do not let them remove anything. Your home contains classified adjacent materials. Unauthorized handling is a federal offense." Classified. That word hit Crawford like a freight train. Nolan set the jewelry box down slowly, like it was made of plutonium. Simmons stepped back from the desk where documents had been photographed. Fiona lowered the phone, turned to Crawford. Her voice was granite wrapped in velvet. "Sergeant Crawford, instruct your officers to step away from my belongings. Exit through the front door. Wait on the lawn. Now." Crawford hesitated. 1/2 second of resistance flickered behind his eyes. The instinct to push back, to dominate. It died before it reached his mouth. He keyed his radio. His voice was hoarse and thin, unrecognizable from the man who had pounded on this door 45 minutes ago. "All units, pull out of the residence. Front lawn. Now." Officers filed out one by one, heads down, boots dragging. No one spoke. No one looked at Fiona. Gloria sat on the couch, tears still wet on her cheeks. Fiona walked to her, knelt on the hardwood, took her mother's trembling, cold hands. "It's over, Mama." Gloria leaned forward, pressed her forehead against Fiona's shoulder, and released a breath she had been holding for 45 minutes. Outside, the helicopter peeled away. The searchlight vanished. The house on Laurel Creek Drive was still for the first time since the knock. But this story was far from over. Crawford stood on the front lawn like a man watching his own house burn down. His officers formed a loose half-circle behind him. Nobody spoke. The patrol lights still flashed, but the sirens were off. The only sound was crickets waking up and the low hum of idling engines. Fiona stepped onto the porch, back straight, arms at her sides. The porch light cast a long shadow that stretched across the lawn and stopped at Crawford's boots. He approached her. The swagger was gone. He moved like a man walking on ice. "Ma'am, Colonel, I was just doing my job. We received a call. That's protocol." "You received a call. You verified my identity. Dispatch confirmed I was the homeowner. And you entered anyway." She paused. "That wasn't your job, Sergeant. That was your choice." Crawford shifted tactics. Softer voice, almost friendly. "Look, no harm done, right? Nothing damaged, nothing taken. We can chalk this up to a misunderstanding. You made my 72-year-old mother cry on a couch while a stranger told her she couldn't use the bathroom in her own family's home." Each word landed like a hammer on cold steel. "That is harm. Don't you dare tell me no harm was done." Crawford opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He looked at the ground. 18 minutes later, a black SUV with government plates rolled onto Laurel Creek Drive. Two figures stepped out. Dark suits, Department of Defense credentials. General Coleman had made his calls. They weren't here for Fiona. They were here to assess whether classified adjacent materials had been compromised by unauthorized personnel. Every officer who touched a document or photographed a page was now a person of interest in a potential federal security breach. They collected badge numbers, took written statements, photographed the interior, open drawers, disturbed documents, the jewelry box that had been handled. 20 minutes later, a dark blue sedan arrived. Deputy Chief Eleanor Watts stepped out. Black woman, mid-50s, silver-streaked hair pulled tight. 28 years in law enforcement. The expression on her face said she had seen enough tonight to last another 28. She walked straight to Crawford. No handshake, no greeting. Sergeant Crawford, you are relieved of duty immediately, pending internal affairs investigation. Deputy Chief, if you'll just let me, your firearm. He stared for 3 seconds, then unholstered his weapon and handed it over. Watts extended her hand again. Your badge. He unclipped it. Metal scraped fabric. Watts dropped it into an evidence bag. She turned to Nolan. Suspended without pay. Report to Internal Affairs Monday morning. Do not speak to the press. Nolan nodded. Her face was gray. Watts walked up the porch steps to Fiona, removed her reading glasses. Her voice shifted, softer, carrying weight and weariness in equal measure. Colonel Henderson, on behalf of the Fairview Heights Police Department, I am deeply sorry. What happened tonight was a violation of your rights and your mother's well-being. It never should have happened. Fiona's eyes glistened for the first time all evening. Not a weakness, exhaustion. Thank you, Deputy Chief, but it shouldn't happen to anyone, not just colonels. Watts held her gaze, nodded slowly. That's exactly what this investigation will address. Down the street, an officer knocked on Diane Whitmore's door. She opened it smiling, expecting gratitude. Ma'am, there was no break-in. The woman you reported is the homeowner, a retired Army colonel. Diane's smile collapsed. Well, how was I supposed to know? Filing a false police report is a Class 1 misdemeanor in Virginia. You may be contacted by investigators. The door closed slowly. The porch light clicked off. Terrence Davis ended his live stream at 7:48 p.m. that Friday night. By then, 3,200 people had watched it in real time. He saved the footage, uploaded the full recording to every platform he had, and went to bed. By Saturday morning, the video had 4 million views. By Monday, 22 million. The footage was 26 minutes long, unedited, no music, no commentary, just a steady phone camera pointed at a house where a barefoot black woman stood on her own porch while 12 armed officers treated her like a fugitive. The internet did what the internet does. It found every frame, every detail, every damning second. Crawford's smirk when Fiona said she owned the house. Gloria's trembling hands going up in the kitchen. The officer who told a 72-year-old woman she couldn't use the bathroom. Crawford barking, "Did I ask you?" at Simmons. And the moment, the exact frame, where Crawford's face turned white when he heard the word Colonel. That frame became a meme within hours. Someone captioned it, "When the person you racially profiled outranks your entire department." It was shared 1.6 million times in 2 days. Hashtags exploded across every platform. Fiona Henderson, Fairview Heights, Colonel on the screen, Justice for Gloria. The video played on CNN, MSNBC, ABC, and every local affiliate in Virginia. News vans lined Laurel Creek Drive by Tuesday. Reporters knocked on doors. Neighbors who had stood on their porches watching with wine glasses suddenly had no comment. But the video was only the beginning. What came next was the investigation. Fairview Heights Police Department launched an internal affairs review within 48 hours. The Department of Defense opened a parallel investigation into the potential compromise of classified adjacent materials. The FBI Civil Rights Division began a preliminary inquiry into whether Crawford's actions constituted a federal civil rights violation. And then Crawford's file was opened. 14 prior complaints. 14. Exposed, documented, and exposed in local and national press. Racial profiling, excessive force against minorities, verbal intimidation, unlawful detentions. Not a single one had ever been formally sustained. Every complaint had been reviewed internally, marked unfounded or insufficient evidence, and filed away. The pattern was clear, and so was the cover-up. 3 supervisors who had signed off on those dismissals were identified by name. Officer Tyler Simmons was the first to break ranks. He gave a full written statement to Internal Affairs describing everything he witnessed that night. Crawford's refusal to accept verified ID, the warrantless entry, the fabricated exigent circumstance, the attempted property seizure, and the order to silence him when he tried to intervene. His body camera, the only one running that night, provided 41 minutes of uninterrupted footage from inside the house. Crawford's body camera had been switched off before he reached the front door. Nolan's had been malfunctioning since the start of shift. Internal Affairs noted both facts in bold in their preliminary report. 3 other officers from the scene followed Simmons. They provided statements in exchange for reduced disciplinary action. Their accounts matched Terrence's video, frame by frame. The case went to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office within 2 weeks. A federal grand jury was convened shortly after. The charges came down like a hammer. Sergeant Dale Crawford. Unlawful entry, Class 6 felony under Virginia law. Violation of Fourth Amendment rights. Federal civil rights charge under 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Filing a false incident report for fabricating the exigent circumstance that justified his entry. Intimidation of a witness, Officer Simmons, for ordering him to remain silent during the commission of an unlawful act. Officer Brenda Nolan, accessory to unlawful entry. Failure to intervene during a civil rights violation. Terminated from the department, charged separately. Diane Whitmore, filing a false police report, Class 1 misdemeanor. Swatting, initiating a massive armed police response through a knowingly false emergency call. A civil lawsuit filed by Fiona's attorney for emotional distress, targeting both Whitmore and the department. The trial began on a cold morning in November. National media covered it live. The courtroom gallery was standing room only. Crawford showed up in a charcoal suit with a defense attorney who argued he was following established department protocol and acting on a good faith belief that criminal activity was in progress. The prosecution dismantled that argument in less than a day. They played Terrence's video, all 26 minutes. The courtroom was silent. They played Simmons's body camera footage, 41 minutes. The jury watched Crawford smirk, watched him push past Fiona into her home, watched him hold up her pearl necklace and ask if she could prove it was hers, watched Gloria's hands shake, watched the officer deny her the bathroom. They played the dispatch recording. The jury heard, clearly, unmistakably, the moment dispatch confirmed Fiona's identity and ownership. Then they heard Crawford tell Nolan, "Something doesn't sit right. Let's clear the house." The prosecution entered Crawford's personnel file into evidence. 14 complaints, 0 sustained. A pattern of racial targeting spanning 9 years, protected by institutional silence. Then Gloria Henderson took the stand. She walked slowly to the witness chair, wooden cane tapping against the courtroom floor. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, folded her hands in her lap the same way she had folded them on that couch. She described the kitchen, the shattered glass, the officer shouting at her to put her hands up, the fear that made her legs stop working, the couch where she sat crying, the moment she asked to use the bathroom and was told to wait. Then she said something that silenced every person in that room. I grew up in North Carolina in 1954. I drank from separate water fountains. I sat in the back of the bus. I walked past restaurants that had signs in the window telling me I wasn't welcome. She paused, drew a slow breath. I survived Jim Crow. I thought those days were behind us. But sitting on that couch, in my own daughter's home, being told I couldn't use the bathroom by a man who had no right to be there, I felt like I was 10 years old again. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty. All counts. Sergeant Dale Crawford, 4 years in federal prison, lifetime ban from law enforcement. Name entered into the National Decertification Index. Officer Brenda Nolan, 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, permanent termination. Law enforcement certification revoked. Diane Whitmore, fined $10,000, 200 hours of community service, civil settlement of $250,000 paid to Fiona Henderson for emotional distress. The 3 supervisors who had buried Crawford's 14 prior complaints were forced to resign. 2 faced separate disciplinary hearings. Fairview Heights Police Department entered a federal consent decree, mandatory body cameras with tamper-proof activation, independent civilian oversight board, annual racial bias training, and a complete review of all prior excessive force complaints dating back 15 years. Fiona Henderson stood on the courthouse steps after the verdict. Reporters pressed microphones toward her face. Cameras flashed. She made a brief statement. Then she announced the creation of the Gloria Henderson Foundation, a nonprofit providing free legal aid to victims of racial profiling and police overreach. Named for her mother, funded with the civil settlement and her own money. She testified before the Virginia State Legislature the following spring. Her testimony lasted 45 minutes. 3 bills were introduced as a direct result. The system that failed her that Friday evening was now being rebuilt, in part, because she refused to break. So where is everyone now? Fiona Henderson still lives at 412 Laurel Creek Drive. Same house, same porch. Same street where 12 officers once pointed their weapons at her bare feet. She never considered moving, not for a single day. But she did make one change. That framed photograph, the one that sat on the mantel in bubble wrap the night everything happened, she finally hung it. Not in the living room, not in the hallway, on the front porch, right next to the door. Eye level, impossible to miss. Colonel Fiona Henderson, United States Army, full dress uniform, American flag behind her, insignia gleaming. Every neighbor who walks past her house sees it. Every delivery driver, every jogger, every patrol car that rolls down Laurel Creek Drive. She wanted it there. She wanted it visible, not as a warning, as a fact. She continues her consulting work with the Pentagon, flies to Washington twice a month, spends every other weekend reviewing grant applications for the Gloria Henderson Foundation, which has now provided free legal representation to over 200 families across Virginia, North Carolina, and Maryland. Gloria Henderson received a personal letter of apology from the Fairview Heights Chief of Police. A second letter arrived from the Governor of Virginia. She framed both, hung them on her living room wall in North Carolina, right next to her church photographs and a portrait of her late husband. She visits Fiona every summer. She uses the bathroom whenever she pleases. Nobody tells her to wait. Sergeant Dale Crawford is serving year 2 of his 4-year federal sentence. His appeals have been denied, twice. His law enforcement certification has been permanently revoked. His name sits in the National Decertification Index, which means no police department in the United States will ever hire him again. His pension was forfeited. Officer Brenda Nolan left Virginia 6 months after the trial. She works in private security for a warehouse company in Ohio. She has never made a public statement. She has never apologized. Officer Tyler Simmons stayed. He cooperated fully with the investigation from day one. He was promoted to Community Relations Officer, the first in the department's history. He now leads outreach programs between the Fairview Heights PD and local minority neighborhoods. In a television interview last spring, he said, "I should have spoken up that night. Not after, not the next day. That night. And I will carry that with me for the rest of my career. But I won't make that mistake again." Terrence Davis's footage earned him a Regional Journalism Award. He now runs a community accountability page with over 500,000 followers. He still lives 2 doors down from Fiona. They wave to each other every morning. Diane Whitmore sold her house 3 months after the verdict. She moved out of state. She never apologized. Not to Fiona, not to Gloria, not publicly, not privately, not once. So let me ask you this, and I want you to really sit with it before you answer. If Fiona hadn't been a colonel, if that phone call hadn't come in at exactly 6:30 p.m., if there was no general, no star, no Pentagon seal on the wall behind him, how does this story end? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear it. And if this story made you feel something, if it made you angry or sad or fired up or all 3 at once, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because here's the truth, and it's the only truth that matters at the end of all of this. Justice should not depend on your rank. It should not depend on your title. It should not depend on who picks up when your phone rings. It should depend on one thing and one thing only, that you are a human being. And until that is true for every single person in this country, regardless of what they look like or where they live or how much money is in their bank account, we keep telling these stories. We keep telling them until they stop being necessary.